Hello, everyone. Welcome to our virtual event space. So my name is Allie, and I'm your host for this evening, and I am so excited to be introducing Mona Awad and Heather O'Neill here to discuss Mona's newest novel, All Is Well. So, let's see, there we go. So before we get into the good stuff, I just want to quickly thank you all so much for tuning in. As much as we miss having you all in the bookstore, it has been such a delight to expand this online program and connect readers and authors in a virtual space. So thank you all so much for tuning in and for buying books. Your support is what makes all of this possible. So some of you in attendance tonight are members of our Signed First Editions Club. We'd like to thank you all for your patronage and for attending events like tonight's. All's Well was the August selection of our signature Reads subscription box. A special service we offer that delivers 6 new works of fiction to your door each year as selected by our booksellers. So subscribers to our club will be receiving the book, of course, as well as a few gifts, which I am so excited to show off. So first, let's get the box over here. First, you will be getting a playbill. Let's make sure you can actually see it. This is a playbill. It has a letter from third place bookseller and manager extraordinaire Erin about why we loved this book and why we chose it for our box. Second, we will be giving a custom designed bookmark, which looks so cute. A third, there is this very adorable little pill box with mints inside. Let's see if I can make sure you can see. It says All's Well on the front. And finally, if you get through this book and want to read the main character's favorite play, don't worry, we get it. And we're including a copy of All's Well that ends well in the box as well. So if you'd like to subscribe to our signature Reads subscription box, you can learn more on our website, thirdplacebooks.com, and I will, of course, be linking to the page in chat. I will also be linking directly to books in chat all evening, so it'll be super easy to go and find them. For those of you in the Seattle area, come on in. All 3 of our locations are open, or you can place an order online and come and pick them up in store. Or if you're not local, we of course do ship. And once again, we are so grateful for your support. While you are over on our website, I definitely encourage you to check out some of our other upcoming events. We have an exciting roster coming up over the next few months. And if you'd like to stay in touch with our community, you can sign up for our newsletter. It's a weekly update about events and exciting releases, our online book clubs, and of course, follow us on any of the major social media platforms. We are at Third Place Books for the quickest updates and recommendations. So we are here for about an hour, and towards the end, we will be taking questions. So if you have any questions, which we very much hope that you do, go ahead and leave those in the Q&A box, which should be either at the top or at the bottom of your screen. It is different than the chat box, which is great for virtual applause and connecting with each other. We'd love to know where you're from or your latest favorite read, but when it comes time for questions, do make sure those end up in the Q&A so we can most easily find them. Now, before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone of our commitment to ensuring the safety and well-being of our event attendees and guest authors. So in our chat and question spaces, please do lead with kindness and refrain from any inappropriate behavior or harassment. Finally, there are auto-generated closed captions available at the top or bottom of the screen. Select the live transcript button to enable or disable them. And I believe that is all of my housekeeping. So without further ado, I am so thrilled to introduce Mona Awad, the author of hilarious, deranged in a wonderful way, Bunny, which was named a best book of 2019 by Time, Vogue, and the New York Public Library. It is a finalist for the New England Book Award and a Goodreads Choice Award. It is currently in development for film with Jenny Connor and the New Regency Productions. Awad's first novel, 13 Ways of Looking at a Fat Girl, was a finalist for the Scotiabank Giller Prize and winner of the Colorado Book Award and the Amazon Canada First Novel Award. Her newest novel, All's Well, follows a theater professor living with chronic pain, which no one takes seriously, and trying to put on a play. Third place booksellers, myself included, really loved this book. Robert called it an utterly addictive read worthy of a standing ovation. So in conversation tonight, I'm so pleased to introduce Heather O'Neill, a novelist, short story writer, and essayist. Her work, which includes Lullabies for Little Criminals, The Girl Who Was Saturday Night, Daydreams of Angels, and The Lonely Hearts Hotel, has been shortlisted for the Governor General's Literary Award for Fiction, the Orange Prize for Fiction, the Scotiabank Giller Prize in 2 consecutive years, and has won the CBC Canada Reads, the Paragraph Hugh McLennan Prize for Fiction, and the Danuta Greed Award. Her forthcoming novel, When We Lost Our Heads, which I cannot wait to get my hands on, comes out in February and is available for pre-order. So keep an eye in chat for links. And with that, thank you both so very much for being here. I am so excited to listen in on this conversation. If you need anything, of course, give me a shout. I will be listening, and the same goes for you in the audience. I will be in chat. And with that, I'm going to pass the stage to our authors. So welcome.
Thanks so much, Allie and Third Place Books. I'm so honored to be doing this event with you. I love Third Place Books so much. Whenever I'm in Seattle, I always visit, just because it's such a wonderful bookstore. So thank you so much for the support. And I'm beyond thrilled to be in conversation with Heather O'Neill. She's such a brilliant writer, so exciting, so inventive, a total kindred spirit. So this is really a dream come true for me. So thank you, Heather. And thank you all for coming.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Mona. And yes, thank everyone. Thank you to everyone for coming. Yeah, so let's get a conversation underway. I mean, obviously, we need to start talking about the Shakespeare. And so essentially, this is 2 plays, Macbeth and All's Well That Ends Well, sort of integrated, because the professor wants to put on All's Well That Ends Well. The students want to put on Macbeth, and then the novel kind of has both of the plays. Can you just talk to why you decided to do that and how you kind of use both those plays?
Yeah, it was really interesting because they're so different, you know, on the surface. One is just this really bizarre comedy with this really strange, almost you know, inconceivable happy ending. Don't even really know if it's happy. But that really drew me to it. It has kind of like a strange fairy tale energy where the happy ending almost feels like, is it really happy? I'm not sure. And then on the other hand, you've got Macbeth, which is this really dark tragedy. But I always saw a connection between the 2 of them because they both have these central characters, Helen in All's Well That Ends Well, and then Macbeth, who have this hidden desire that at the start of the play, it doesn't seem like it can be realized within the world of the play, you know, and they both have to take this transgressive action. They both have to circumvent the natural order of things in order to get what they want. And then one goes down the road of comedy and one goes down the road of tragedy. So I thought what I would do with this book is put the comedy on stage, which is what this director, she desperately wants for her life. She wants this happy ending, this fairy tale, and then have her live the tragic version off stage.
Yeah, it was interesting because after I read the book, I was I reread All's Well That Ends Well because it's not really such a popular play. And then it's interesting because your main character, Miranda, she kind of sees herself as such a good person in a way, but then you read Helen's she's kind of evil. Like if you look at it, it's so manipulative. And then it's a play that uses the bed trick where she sleeps with somebody. I mean, it's essentially rape. And then it just kind of changes the way you see Miranda.
Yeah, no, totally.
So I was like, but I loved Miranda, but how evil is she? Like the students accuse her of being incredibly like evil and manipulating them, and she just plays dumb. But how how evil did you think of Miranda? Or is she unlikable, or you love her, or
Yeah, that's such a great question. And that's why I love All's Well, is because that main character, Helen, she is villainous, which is why I thought of Macbeth a lot when I was reading All's Well, because she struck me as potentially monstrous in the way that Macbeth becomes monstrous, you know, in her desire, in her single-mindedness. She is villainous. So she's very polarizing because she's also a heroine, you know, she's this poor orphan girl, you know, who just wants this courtier who doesn't want her. And it's so sad. And we should root for her, but should we? Because she is very cunning. She takes a lot of agency in the play. She does perform some trickery. So I used that kind of trickster energy with Miranda, and I kind of enjoyed that. I enjoyed playing with the notion of her monstrosity, her villainy. To what degree is she a villain? And Macbeth kind of gave me that license too. You know, I sort of knew the moments where she was moving from hero to potentially a villain. And it was a very exciting moment because it kind of opened up the book. She became a character who, even though she's very human, you know, she's struggling with this chronic pain and nobody believes she has it and she desperately wants to be free of it. She begins to do things that challenge our sympathies, for sure. Yeah.
And was it interesting for you to, like, there is kind of like the inside is All's Well That Ends Well, but then a lot around her is Macbeth. And then you were setting it in New England, in Massachusetts, and you bring up the Puritanism and that sort of witchcraft that is kind of inhabits in other people's imagination, like the common imagination. We associate witchcraft with Massachusetts. So was it, did you kind of play with that idea, and did it affect how you presented Macbeth?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I knew it was going to be set in New England because New England is so witchy. In fact, I got the idea going to a bar in Salem. It was part of how I got the idea. I did see three men at a bar in Salem. There are these three men that recur in the book. They're the witches. And yeah, they really struck me as very strange because they were there in the middle of the day. And there was just something odd about them. And yeah, there's a witchiness to New England, but then on the other hand, there's also this Puritan streak. And I think that kind of dichotomy is fascinating, and I wanted to play with that in the space of this book, because Miranda has these desires that feel very to take action, to actually like act upon her desire would be a very transgressive thing. And so New England felt like the perfect setting for somebody to be transgressive in that way.
Yeah, and it's also with New England, I associate it with colleges also, the American college, which is a huge sort of backdrop for the book. And it's funny, I was talking the other day to someone I know who's a professor, and she was getting nervous about starting to teach again. And she said, you have to be so careful. You can't show them any vulnerability, or they're like wolves. They will smell it and come for you. So I was just so interested in how you played with that in the book, that vulnerability of the teacher and that kind of, and the relationship with the students, where the students are almost always trying to somehow destroy the teacher. But can you speak about that? Because you're a professor too, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a weird thing too, because when I was a student, you know, it was really interesting to explore the campus, the world of the campus novel from that perspective. But as a teacher, it's really strange. As a student, you think that the teacher has this power that they just don't really have, you know. And it's only when you're on the other side of the desk, I think, that you really understand that you don't, that the power is an illusion, and that it's actually really terrifying to be the person who is supposed to teach, you know. It's really scary. And so that power dynamic, that notion that students actually have quite a lot of power, that young people have a lot of power, more power than they know, and that it is quite a vulnerable position to be in, to be a teacher, was something I wanted to play with in this book, for sure. Play with student power, and the fear of the power of youth, and the group too, against the single individual, because that's another thing. When you're a student, you're just sitting there with your peers. It's so many of you. It's just there's only one teacher, yeah.
And yeah, when you talk about the group, she's also, I found Miranda was quite terrified of their youth, and she becomes a teacher, a professor almost accidentally. She was an actress who fell off the stage, and kind of that ruined her career, but which you learn at the very beginning. I'm not spoiling anything. So that I found very interesting, the idea, because she's a middle-aged woman and she's so preoccupied by their youth and so intimidated by it, and she sees kind of her golden years as when she was that age too. So it's interesting, like that relationship between the middle-aged woman and the young woman, and what were you kind of going for with that?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I think because she had that accident, so the character, when we meet her, she is this teacher at a college, and she teaches theater, and she's fallen off the stage, as an actor, so she can't be a performer anymore. So she's always looking backward. She's always looking at her past. That's where she sees, her glory days. She doesn't really feel like she's alive anymore. So that's part of why I think she's obsessed with youth, is because she feels like that was when she was alive, and she no longer has that kind of that sense of possibility in her life anymore. So it's very tragic for her, but she does have a fixation with like two students, one negatively, Brianna, who is the star of All's Well That Ends Well, or supposed to be anyway, whom she hates, because she's this rich, entitled student, whose parents are funding the theater program, and then she has a student that she has a lot of affection for, who is kind of more powerless and more of a loner, and she loves her in a way that is kind of, she doesn't even understand why she does. And I was interested in that too, like that kind of relationship that you can have sometimes with a student, where you have affection for them, and you don't really know why, but you do. Yeah.
Oh, that's almost transgressed. It seemed so. Even that was, her hatred was wildly inappropriate for one student, but then her affection for the other also seemed inappropriate. It's like you should have some neutrality.
Yeah. No, I know. She's all the world's a stage for Miranda. So there's no neutrality. It's all a performance. In fact, I think that was one of the reasons why I think I leaned into these aspects of her character, because she's a performer. Everything is enhanced. It can be emphasized. Her emotions can be emphasized in ways that just feel larger than life, and so her affection is larger than life, and also her hatred.
Yeah, and her melodrama, my lord, she is melodramatic. But then, of course, we have to talk about Miranda's pain. She's in chronic pain, and it's right off the top of the book. And it was such an extraordinary treatment of it. It was so visceral and also so funny. So when did you get this idea about chronic pain, and how does it kind of play into the narrative?
Yeah, I struggled with chronic pain for a number of years myself. I injured my hip a while ago, and I had to have a surgery to correct it. But the surgery wasn't very successful, and it was a very, very rough recovery. And because I was unstable on my legs for so long, I injured my back during recovery, and then that just complicated recovery, and I had all these neurological symptoms down both legs, and it was really scary, because suddenly just all of these everyday tasks, that I took for granted, I couldn't do anymore. I was not able to drive, I couldn't really sit down. I I couldn't go grocery shopping. I couldn't like bend down to pick something up, I couldn't do anything. And for a very long time. And surgery wasn't an option. I'd already had a surgery. So I was just kind of going from one doctor to another, one physiatrist to another, one physical therapist to another. And the path to recovery was very unclear. And so I just never knew if I was going to be okay again. And what I also, experienced during that time was that was a reality for a lot of people. Like a lot of people were in those physical therapy, offices and in those physiatry offices, and were dealing with these issues, and it had severely impacted their lives. And yet we still had to carry on. I still had to work. I still had a job to do. I still had to teach, and so I was just interested in exploring that, just how chronic pain affects so many aspects of everyday life, and how we have to kind of carry on in spite of it, but how isolating it can be.
Yeah, all the other characters, they have a hostile attitude towards it. They almost seem like she needs to knock it off.
Right.
There's, I think, a discussion by all the characters about how much her chronic pain is invented, or she's just like with everything over the top, or is it actually real? And were you playing it that it's completely real, or is it also exacerbated by her existential, like, constant ennui?
Well, I think that's the thing that makes it so tricky, is when you are dealing with an affliction, any kind of affliction. It could be mental illness, it could be just emotional pain, but physical pain that's difficult to pinpoint. It's hard to actually not doubt yourself, And so, and part of the reason why I think is because there's a performative element to communicating it to people. Like when I would try to explain my pain to doctors or to physical therapists or even to my friends, I would find myself kind of like, performing it a little bit physically, right, just to make them understand it, like not for any other reason, just to communicate it, because it's so hard to communicate the experience of pain. Language kind of falls short. It's such a visceral experience. But it in the act of performing it, you've emphasized it, right? You've heightened it. And then you start to doubt yourself because you just heightened it. So it's a very strange, like, space to occupy, again, like very isolating, and becomes very easy to doubt yourself. And doctors are inclined, I think a lot of doctors are inclined to be very dismissive of it too.
Yeah, especially with women, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. And I was very interested in that, and that kind of dismissal, and how helpless it can make you feel, because, I mean, you're going to this person for help and they're kind of denying your reality, your experienced reality of like what's going on in your body. They're just finding ways to diminish it, or, just to kind of send you away, because the truth is it's not that it's not happening to you. It's just that they don't really know what to do,
Yeah, and there's the issue of with disabilities and pain and illness where you're just supposed to hide away, which is something about Miranda, who is such an exhibitionist. So she's just, and finds a way in life just to put herself always in the center.
Yeah.
Everyone's just like, stop, either like stop hurting or just hide yourself where the injured go.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's part of what was exciting about The Voice, and part of the reason why Helen was so exciting to work with, is that she has these moments at the start of All's Well That Ends Well, where she openly expresses to the audience her pain and her desire for Bertram, and it's like a kind of plea, like, understand that this is what I feel, and so Miranda is that kind of character. I use that in her character when she's thinking or telling her story. She's talking directly to the reader. It's meant to be very, very intimate. That's her audience, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and I felt I was very much on her side, despite all her insanity. I was just totally, I'm going with Miranda. One of the things I thought I noticed that was interesting, because there's so many like layers and strange details and fun clues in the book, but the four doctors that she goes to see are called Matthew, Mark, John, and Luke, which are the four evangelists in the New Testament. So what was that meant to convey?
Well, I was having a lot of fun with that because doctors, it feels a little bit like it's an act of faith as a patient, you know, especially when you're in that terrain where surgery is no longer an option and you're kind of in that weird rehab like space.
Mm.
You know? It becomes about being a good patient, having faith, being positive, understanding that there's a mental component to recovering, you know, and that's, I don't know, I'm so suspicious of that. I'm very suspicious of that. And so I had a little bit of fun with that. The fact that she is, you know, she is going to these men, she's hoping that they will make her well. But when they don't, they kind of, when she's not better, when she isn't magically like, or not magically, but just healed by their efforts, they kind of turn it on her and they sort of make it a question of her not being a good patient, her not having faith, her not being in good faith, going through the process of recovery with them, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting that you used the word magical because they almost want her to engage in magical thinking.
Yes, exactly,
And
exactly.
which leads me to another question. In this book and in Bunny, you really explore magical realism, and kind of the further we go into the books, the more the realism of the universe begins to disintegrate and just strange things start happening. So I was wondering how you conceive of that idea of magical realism, and do you have parameters of it and for it, and how do you use magic in your work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think with Bunny, it came in part because I had a main character who was a writer, and she had this imagination that was both a blessing and a curse, you know, and that she went to for solace, but it would just lead her down these dangerous roads where she could no longer distinguish between the story that she was spinning for herself and reality. And so, you know, the book is about the kind of consolation of the imagination, but also the dangers of the imagination. And then I think with this one, you know, I was dealing with theater, and I love theater so much. Theater's so exciting because everything is heightened and anything is possible. And so I wanted to play with that. Theater allowed me to kind of open up the borders of reality, and to extend the stage, because Miranda is living this other play off stage against her will. I could extend the stage beyond the theater department into the whole world of the novel. And that was very exciting. And then the other component of the magical that's in there comes from the fairy tale elements of All's Well. You know, there's a magical healing in the play. And then there's also this reversal, you know, as a result of Helen's clever wenchery, you know, I don't even know if wenchery is a word, but, you know, she's a clever wench. She's a stock character from fairy tale. And so that also allowed me to play with magic in the book. It's a careful what you wish for story, and that's one of my favorite stories. I love that about fairy tale. That fairy tale is so interested in looking at psychological and emotional pain that we experience, desires and fears that we have that are very real, very human, and then using fantasy and magic to explore, well, what would happen if you got that? What would be the cost of that? Mm-hmm. And so I've always loved that about fairy tales. They always ring true because they come from that very human impulse, you know, human impulses that we have.
Yeah, and her name Miranda, it put me in mind of The Tempest, which was such a cool play. So it just seems in that element too, she has just this access to so much magic. Which makes you wonder, do you feel like she's not living out, like her potential, because she has all these crazy, she's so obsessed with the past, but she
Yeah.
has this magic buried in her that she's kind of turned into something toxic.
Yeah, I think nostalgia can do that. I'm really interested in how toxic nostalgia can be, because it's a lie. I mean, it's a, you know, it's a story that we tell ourselves about the past. And what's informing that story, you know? Is it real? It's never fully real. But we can be so seduced by it. And we can become paralyzed by it, I think. It can give us so much pain to look backwards. And this is a character who is constantly looking backwards. And so she's very vulnerable because of that, because that's all she wants, is to go back to the self that she was, you know? And the book really explores, I think, that feeling that, you know, so many of us have. Certainly I've had it. I know what that feels like. But I do think that there's something kind of very darkly seductive about nostalgia. It's very dangerous.
Yeah, she's almost addicted to it, and she just just lets herself go, and just like, I'm like, don't do that. Just she's like, no, I'm gonna go with the ex-husband.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll lie in bed and like just let that wash over me. But yeah, although that makes it sound like really kind of dark, this book is so funny. I have not laughed like so hard reading a book. Like even right from the get-go, all the observations are so funny, and they're so biting and sly, and they just kind of speak to all those realities we kind of keep we don't want to admit about ourselves. So it's interesting. Like, are you just kind of, when you write, do you think about humor? Are you naturally funny, or is it how have you developed your humor over the years?
Yeah, that's, I mean, it's so, it does always seem to be a part of the story. I can't seem to help it. So it's definitely, it's definitely a part of, I guess, the way I like to tell a story, or observe things. But I think it comes from like my own very kind of, I'm very, very melodramatic, and I'm very dark-minded. And at the same time, there's always like a part of me, no matter how melodramatic I get or how dark-minded I get, that's always kind of laughing a little bit at that.
Yeah.
Like I can't help it. I've always done it. Even in really painful moments, like I've always like seen some humor. Just always been the case. And I don't know if it's a coping mechanism. I don't know, but it always also feels true. Feels like a part of the truth of the experience is that moment of humor. So I always go there. And that's why I love All's Well too, is because it has both tragic and comic elements. So to me, even though it's such a bizarre story, I'm making it sound so like weird. It's not that weird. It's really a very compelling play. But it has both in it. And so I was really drawn to that aspect of the play, that is problematic because it has both the tragic and the comic in it, and you can't fit it easily, neatly into either category.
Mm. And it's also, there's a lot of humor in your work too, just in the like the surprise, the shock of it, which I guess is always part of humor. And do you find there's just so much because I find so many books by women now are just so hilarious, and they're like never marketed as stuff because we as a society weren't used to until recently thinking of women as funny. And do you think it's because there's so much unspoken about the female experience that now it's just we're just able to be funny about it? Or why do you think we're just able to be so much funnier now?
No, I think there's some permission there. I mean, that maybe wasn't there before. I mean, I've always, I mean, I love that we're both like Montrealers. So, you know, we know the Just for Laughs festival, which is like such a brilliant festival that I used to love to go to when I was a kid. I saw so many great comedians there, and some really like amazing women also. And then as a kid, I remember too loving Absolutely Fabulous. I just loved it so much. Joanna Lumley and Jennifer Saunders, they're so brilliant. And it felt very transgressive. It felt like dangerous. They were so inappropriate. They were so wildly inappropriate. But I loved it. I loved how dark the humor was. I was so drawn to it. And I was very inspired by it. So yeah, I do think that now there's room for that in a way that maybe there wasn't before. And I love that there is.
Yeah, it's like women weren't allowed to take that space, and it was
Yeah.
just so frowned upon, but I think we just don't care if
Yeah.
we're frowned upon.
Yeah. Yeah. It's nice. I like that. Yeah.
Actually, now would be like a really fun time, just so everybody can get a sense of your voice and the humor, if you wanted to read something from the book.
Yeah, so I'll read from the opening. And in the opening, Miranda is lying on the floor of her office in pain, dreading having to go down to rehearsal and deal with her students who are mutinous and want Macbeth, which of course she wants all as well. Okay. I'm lying on the floor watching against my will a bad actress in a drug commercial tell me about her fake pain. Just because my pain is invisible, she pleads to the camera, doesn't mean it isn't real. And then she attempts a face of what I presume to be her invisible suffering. Her brow furrows as though she's about to take a difficult shit or else have a furious but forgettable orgasm. Her mouth is a thin grimace. Her dim eyes attempt to accuse something vague in the distance, a god perhaps. Her bloodless complexion is convincing, though they probably achieved this with makeup and lighting. You can do a lot with makeup and lighting, I have learned. I lie here on my back on the roughly carpeted floor with my legs in the air at a right angle from my body. My calves rest on my office chair seat, feet dangling over the edge. One hand on my heart, the other on my diaphragm. Cigarette in my mouth. Snow blows onto my face from an open window above me that I'm unable to close. Lying like this will supposedly help decompress my spine and let the muscles in my right leg unclench. Help the fist behind my knee to go slack so that when I stand up, I'll be able to straighten my leg and not hobble around like Richard III. This is a position that, according to Mark, I can supposedly go into for relief, self-care, a time out from life. I think of Mark, Mark of the dry needles, Mark of the scraping silver tools, his handsome bro face, a wall of certainty framed by a crew cut, ever nodding at my various complaints as though they are all part of a grand upward journey that we are taking together, Mark and I. I lie like this and I do not feel relief. Left hip down to the knee, still on vague fire. A fist in my mid-back that won't unclench. Right leg is concrete all the way to my foot, which, even though it's in the air, is still screaming as if crushed by some terrible weight. I picture the leg of a chair pressing onto my foot. A chair being sat on by a very fat man. The fat man is a sadist. He is smiling at me. His smile says, I shall sit here forever, here with you on the third floor of this dubious college where you are dubiously employed. Theater studies, AKA one of 2 sad concrete rooms in the English department. Your office, I presume? Rather shabby. Downstairs in the sorry excuse for a theater, they're waiting for me. Where is Miss Fitch already? She should be here by now, shouldn't she? Rehearsals begin, well, now. Maybe she's sick or something. Maybe she's drunk or on drugs or something. Maybe she went insane. I picture them, my students, sitting on the stage, swinging long, pliant legs over the edge, young faces glowing with health as though they were spawned by the sun itself, waiting for my misshapen body to hobble through the double doors, quietly cursing my name as we speak, about to declare mutiny any minute now. And I'll stop there.
Oh. I love that so much. It so has that Shakespearean feel is so like suffuses it. It's amazing. I'm just gonna see if our friends have questions. Okay. In my my head, I imagine that Bunny and All's Well exist in the same universe and maybe even at the same college. I wonder if that was the same for you.
Huh. That's a really interesting question. I would hate to, yeah, I would hate to like impose my thinking. I'd love to give the reader like room. But yeah, the bunny is interesting because it's a very like it's very Ivy, you know. It's like this little bubble of like privilege. And then All's Well, I pictured like, yeah, I pictured like a kind of a more another kind of college. Yeah, maybe a little bit more, I guess, like a little liberal arts college, you know, with like a underfunded, not much money there, you know, and a place where an actor with not very much pedigree could get a job teaching, you know.
Yeah, Church doesn't have much pride teaching either.
Yeah, exactly. So to me, they are a little bit different in terms of like the elitism of the Bunny campus versus this one. But I do think that, yeah, the setting, the New England kind of setting of it, absolutely a lot of connection between the two for sure. So that's probably that's the energy that I'm sure is in there. That's similar.
And do you think of all your books as like you're working on this larger oeuvre and they kind of build from one another? Like,
yeah,
All's Well not have been possible without Bunny, or do you think of your work that way?
I do. I really, really do. I actually think it's a trilogy, and I think the one that I'm just that I'm working on now is the third of a trilogy. But I do think that they inform each other, and in a lot of ways, All's Well couldn't have been written without 13 Ways and Bunny. I think it has elements of both. You know, because 13 Ways is really interested in body image, which I think this book is too. But it also has the magical fairy tale elements of Bunny.
Right. Do you have any movies or music artists that inspire descriptions in writing? I love the way the honorific and beautiful, she's horrific, sorry. Horrific and beautiful and dramatic are paired and often alliterative.
Oh, thank you so much.
The question is, movies or music artists that inspire you?
Movies or music artists that inspire me. Well, I mean, I obviously love David Lynch, you know, and love Twin Peaks, the first season especially. Yeah, there's a dreaminess in David Lynch, and I think he's interested too in the surreal and these fantastic moments that have their power because they are not explained. And I love that so much. That really excites me as a storyteller, because I think that's where fairy tales get their power. They get their power from a kind of experience of wonder that you can have that is not something that can be explained, you know, even articulated fully. And so, yeah, I love David Lynch's films, and I love Welcome to the Dollhouse, which is like it's an older film about this like 13-year-old girl who's like a total outsider. Welcome. Yes, that's right. Directed by Todd Solondz. It's such a great, like, eviscerating depiction of outsiderness and awkwardness. And I just love it so much. And yeah, I mean, music is always such an important part of my process. I don't know if this is the case for you, Heather. I imagine it is. But I love making playlists while I'm working. And for All's Well, I listen to a lot of Judy Garland. And it's so weird because I think the book has this shadow side and this brightness. Yeah, there's like I began to hear those elements in the Judy Garland songs, the shadow like aspects of the songs and her voice, and you know, I'm sure I was also projecting my knowledge of what I knew she was going through. But yeah, Judy Garland's music for sure was very inspiring for All's Well.
Oh, it's interesting. And all the drug use too.
Absolutely right. Yes.
Someone says the drug commercial opening scene was spot on.
Yeah.
Which of your 3 published books have been the most difficult to complete, or which was the biggest challenge overall?
13 Ways was really, really hard because it was my first.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, it took it took like 6 years, I guess, for me to really get going, like, and really work on it seriously. But even before then, I think I was thinking about it, you know, I just didn't know what form it would take. So really it probably took much longer than that. And yeah, and I didn't really know how to do plots. I started off in poetry. So learning plot was really hard. So those elements I think made it really challenging. And then of course it was my first, right? So there's so much doubt about whether, you know, I could even really do it. Yeah, what about for you? Which one was it for you?
I don't know. They're all difficult in their particular ways. And I always think with every novel that the next one will be so easy because I figured out what a plot is. But
Right.
do you think in any way, I mean, you teach creative writing. Do you think there's any way you can teach people plot, or it's something you have to do through writing? Like it's just kind of doing it and somehow like you can only figure it out that way.
Right. Yeah, I think that I do think that there are tricks, you know, like for example, fairy tale. If I'm teaching undergrads, I love like giving them fairy tales to teach plot. And then they don't have to think about plot. They can take the fairy tale and they can then reinterpret it however they want. And they have a plot in place so they can kind of work on other elements, but I think they're also internalizing, oh, this is the structure of a story, you know? So it kind of works on 2 levels. The subconscious level, you're kind of internalizing all these plots, but then you're also working on other aspects of writing. I think it can be taught, but it is a hard thing to master. It's actually very, very tricky to plot stories.
It definitely is. Okay, so Julia is here. She's a sleepless Spanish translator from Madrid. I should probably read these in my head before I read them out loud. It is really interesting what you commented about being a teacher. I also teach at a university, and it's so true. The teacher is an individual against the group of students.
Yeah.
Definitely like being an actress in front of a public.
Yes.
Is there a link between these 2 aspects in Miranda?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a performance. You
Yeah.
know, it really is. I mean, yeah, absolutely. You're trying to like get them engaged, get them interested. This group of students. There are performative elements to teaching for sure. And so, you know, so that was interesting to me is, you know, this is like, she's fallen off the stage, but she's still acting up there, you know, she's still having to like give a show, but it's going terribly, you know. I mean, this is like a bad performance. But yeah, I do think that there is that element to it for sure. And it's what makes it exciting. I mean, that's the thing I love about teaching is that it's the students are there and there's an energy, right? And a dynamic and you can create kind of a momentum. You calibrate what you say when you're listening, you know, based on their energy. And that's very similar to, I think, giving a performance, right? As an actor, for sure. You're feeding off of the audience.
And are students like a more difficult audience, do you find? What kind of audience are they generally?
Generally, well, it changes depending on the season. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like in fall, they're probably more excited, and in spring, they're more tired. I mean, that's been my experience, you know. And then in the morning, they might be tired, and mid-morning they might be more awake, and then afternoon, I'm sure this is the case for like actors in theater too. They probably like know all of this stuff, you know, and then in the afternoon they're yawning for sure. So you've got to wake them up, you know, however you can. So yeah, it's like it's a tough audience for sure. It's a tough audience, you know.
Yeah, talking to an actress in London, and she said one of the most difficult thing about performing is all the jet lag North Americans who pass out and fall off their, and you just still have to go through the energy, even though you know you have these sleeping North Americans who can't wake themselves up for anything. I loved how you discussed the tragic comic aspects of the play and the novel in this conversation in the book. Are there films or play production experiences you've had that you feel accomplish that harmony? Good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, Slings and Arrows, which is a Canadian TV show that I adore so much. Have you watched it, Heather? Do you like it?
Yes, I used to watch it. It's amazing.
I love it so much. I love Paul Gross. I love Mark McKinney. So good. Anyway, it's great. I'll say a little bit about it. It's like it was based on a festival in Canada that still exists called the Stratford Festival. And it was like a dramatization of that festival. And so it was like the ins and outs of this theater company who put on Shakespeare plays every season, as well as musicals and other plays. And it was wonderful because the Shakespeare plays would be kind of explored both on stage and off stage. Mm-hmm. And what I loved about the show is that it was funny. It was very funny. Yeah. But it was also, you know, very, very moving and explored some really dark material for sure. And I loved how they achieved that harmony. It was really entrancing and very Shakespearean, because that's the thing about Shakespeare that I love, is that there is like the highs and the lows, there is the comic and the tragic and the lightness and then the heaviness, right? Sometimes within one moment. Yeah. So Slings and Arrows for sure. There's no question.
It's just so intelligent.
Yeah.
It's like Canadian comedy. Now everyone knows Schitt's Creek, but there was years of like really bizarre, unusual, cutting edge shows.
I know. Yeah. Slings and Arrows for sure. And Sleep No More. I don't know. Have you seen that?
No.
Oh my God, you would love it so much. It's an immersive Macbeth.
Oh.
Yeah.
You go into that.
Yeah. It's this like warehouse with all these floors, and you wear a mask, and you have to be mute, like you can't say anything. Mm-hmm. And you just move through, and there are all these scenes and rooms with live actors, you know, who are performing different moments in Macbeth, and they take a lot of license. Like it has these noir elements and kind of like old Hollywood too is in there. But it's very fun, and there are comedic things about it as well. So I loved the experience of moving through Macbeth. That was very inspiring. Yeah.
Okay, we have time. Oops. Maybe for. Oh, hang on. Sorry.
Nice.
Oh, there's something. I'm having trouble getting to. The questions are being. They're doing this very magical thing, like in your book, where the very last question refuses to be read.
That's funny.
Which is very similar to the book, where it's like things move around and there's so many ways to interpret it. But at the same time, it's just wonderfully easy. It's just such a page turner. I just couldn't put it down. I read it in one sitting. And yeah, I think actually we are out of time. And, but I really enjoyed speaking to you and seeing you over the internet.
So wonderful. Yeah. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much, Heather. It's like and anybody who hasn't read Heather O'Neill's novels, you need to go out and get them because they're amazing. She's so brilliant.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Hello, I am back. So it is about time that we call it a night, but I'm just going to say one more time, thank you all so much for being here. This has been such a great conversation. It's such a pleasure to be part of. All of you in the audience who would like to get your hands on a copy of All's Well or to pre-order When We Lost Our Heads, I am going to link them one more time so you don't have to scroll up. Here are these. Go ahead and follow those links to go check out those books. Let us know, of course, what you thought of this event, either in person if you're local or on social media. We always love to hear from you. Heather and Mona, one more huge thank you for this conversation. I feel like we got a nice little peek behind the curtain tonight. And I believe with that, I'll bid you all good evening.
Thank you both so much. Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.